we are going to take a lot of resources from Mother Earth. So am I being conscious of what I'm taking out from that space? And that's the first step to moving to being, a sensible architect. That's one of the core values of our architectural practice. So today a material has become a very interesting palette for me to work with. And it can change qualities the way you want it to work. So you have this, as I earlier said, that romanticism with that material. Nature, light, material are all characters of the story. And as an architect, you weave that story interestingly. So I'll be happy if by the end of my life, if I can create a building which can kill itself after its life and becomes a product for something else. Designers as a profession are going to enter the boardrooms of every corporate in the near future. What we are trying to do with Hampi Center of Design is to understand design and nature in our nature-inspired design workshops.
Our aspirations as mankind is growing. We have begun to question ourselves and are trying to delve deep within to understand ourselves and to grow. We want to operate out of a deep sense of purpose. We have realized that humans can alter their lives by altering the attitudes of mind. Here's an attempt to connect, share, get some of the successful people to open up and in the process learn and find the best within us. An attempt to delve into their minds, thought process and attitudes. How they think, feel, operate, and what are the habits that make them who they are. In the process, accept ourselves with all our insecurities, vulnerabilities, fears, and work towards transforming ourselves and in making ourselves our better version for today and tomorrow. I'm Satish Rao. I'm a vlogger, abundance crusader, and I'm passionate about bringing in abundance in all areas of our lives. A lot of fields today have become commercialized, and there is an element of the heart and soul which is missing from a lot of professions and a lot of activities in today's lives. And the important component is, I would say, design. Design is a component which across industries and across any field, it just permeates through every field, every aspect of our lives. And today we are very fortunate to have Mr. Chetan Shivaprasad. He is a prominent architect from Bangalore. Chetan Shivaprasad has been working as an architect for the past 25 years and heads a studio called Kham Design. He teaches in the field of architecture and conducts design workshops in various universities across India. Now he is venturing into a new foray, Hampi Center for Design, which is a center for design dialogue involving not just architects and designers, but also people from all professions and walks of life. So Mr. Chetan Shivaprasad, welcome to the Abundance Show.
Thank you, Satish. It's a pleasure to be here and have an interesting dialogue in the next couple of hours.
Looking forward to. So Chetan, tell me what's unique about your architecture and your style of working. What's unique about you?
Okay, I don't think we are anything unique about our space, but I think what we try and do in architectural practice is being conscious of what we do. That's one thing which is missing because we are going to take a lot of resources from Mother Earth. So am I being conscious of what I'm taking out from that space? And that's the first step to moving to being, a sensible architect. So that's one of the core values of our architectural practice. We also work with minimizing the use of any material so that our impact on Mother Earth is as minimum as possible. That's another core aspect of our design practice. We also work with cultures. We also work with climate responses. At the end of the day, if a person in North Karnataka, for example, where we're doing quite a few projects where the climates are quite high, we reach 45, 46 degrees. But if I can create a space, an architectural space, which brings down the temperature to around 28 to 30 degrees, without the use of any artificial ventilation, which means that I've reduced consumption of any other material, then I've done something justice. So if you really ask me what's unique, unique is being sensible to the context, to the material and to the user.
Very nice, very good. So how did your interest in architecture come about? How did you start this?
Okay, joining the course was an accident, but I think once I joined the course, I've fallen in love with it, and the last 25, 30 years of my experience with architecture has been very romantic. We've been trying to play with each space we create in a sense that you fall in love with each space you create. So it's been quite romantic in the last 30 years of my experience.
Okay.
So my journey has been when I first joined in as an architectural student. I was the first batch of a particular college. I was a product of the Anand Sagar School of Architecture. I was the first batch student of that college. We didn't have too many faculties. So it gave me a platform to really push myself and explore things from the real world. So I managed to travel across the country. I managed to travel, meet a lot of friends. I was part of an association called the National Association of Students of Architecture as a primary member for a long time, part of the National Council also, where we documented a lot of historical spaces across the country. I was the coordinator for the documentation center. So I managed to see works of close to around 60 colleges of architecture documenting various villages, towns, historical spaces across the country, and I could see that on my platter. So that started my love towards understanding the context. And slowly we started off, I joined a firm called Jaisim Fountainhead.
Which year was it when you were?
This was somewhere between 91 to 96.
Okay.
And from then onwards, I've been continuously traveling.
Oh.
So my leg is on wheels. So I travel on an average around 10 to 15 days in a month, even today.
Oh, okay.
Between places. So
right.
Then I joined an architectural firm called Jaisim Fountainhead, who gave me another dimension, who just pushed me onto a thing where it said that nothing is impossible. So we started questioning everything, and that slowly became the way I started working, of understanding my own boundaries and saying, if this is my boundary, then I consciously step out of that boundary to understand that material or that process a little differently, thereby expanding my boundary. So every act of mine from that then onwards has been about pushing that boundary of stepping out, moving, expanding my horizon. So it could be with a brick. Say, for example, the way we looked at a brick was, it was a material to build a wall. But I pushed that material to a certain level, saying that, can I make a foundation of that? Can I make a roof out of that? Can I make a door out of that? So today a material has become a very interesting palette for me to work with. And it can change qualities the way you want it to work. So you have this, as I earlier said, that romanticism with that material. It could be brick, it could be glass, it could be metal. So you start working and pushing that material to another zone, a step beyond your comfort zone. So that was what was taught to us from Jaisim, including structural systems. Then I started Kham design in 98, if I'm right. And then it's been so many years of practice on Kham design. We've explored architecture at, for residences, for commercial spaces. We've done auditoriums, we've done a hospital, we've done resorts, hotels, everywhere exploring this context.
Okay. So most of these works that you do, you bring an element of nature and how to not disturb nature and how to move forward from that without burdening the nature is what is the concept that you subscribe to. So can you elaborate more on that, and how did this thing come? Because I think it's only fashionable to talk about all these things in the recent times in India especially. I think you are into this space for quite some time. So how did it come about, and what is this philosophy that you subscribe to?
Okay, I think the first act is to see whether is nature something which we need to bring into. I think I negate that thought process. I always start off with the process saying that we are part of nature. So if I am part of nature, how does my architecture relate to that part of nature? So I wouldn't say that we forcibly bring in a landscape into that space or forcibly bring in quality of light into that space. They're all characters of the story. Nature, light, material are all characters of the story. And as an architect, you weave that story interestingly. So you start making, just like an actor has to emote certain thing, you ask sunlight to emote in a particular way, and you create the platform for it to emote. And in that sense, nature becomes a part of the experience of that architecture. So architecture for me there is not just 4 walls of a room. It becomes a storyline for me to relate to, because anything in design is something where you kind of say a story, right? And you need the kind of characters to work with that story. So for me, architecture is that. Sun is a character. Your wind is a character. Your proportions of a room is a character. Your material is a character. Your floor finish is a character. So how do you weave one story into using all these characters and tell an amazing storyline? So nature for me is not something outside the realm of our practice. It's been a part of our practice through and through. Another level where we're pushing now is to really understand that even in terms of structures. So when I start looking at a tree and I say, if a tree does not transfer its loads at a 90 degrees, why are we converting all our built forms converting them into 90 degrees? So you start looking at creating forks in our structures. So say for example, we did a school recently called Arinco Academy, where we questioned the whole realm of saying if my column is a vertical and a horizontal beam is a horizontal member, and instead of that, can I change that by creating an X as a vertical member and then tie it up, understand center of gravity? It's a technical term, but you kind of look at the tree and then put it into a built form, and thereby you create a space which is very, very unique, which requires much lesser material. We almost reduced 30% of our steel consumption by doing that simple act, and we had an amazing space which we created. Similarly, we did for the same school, we did the kindergarten, where we talked about creating large volumes, say 30 feet, around 50 feet of volume, and how do I create that without any columns for a kid to play around. So we looked at how the shell works and tried to understand the framing of the shell and how it can span such a large volume in its proportion. Converted that into an architectural space with the use of very minimum materials, and you created some new drama out of that, and used the gaps between the shells to allow reflected light into that space. And so nature suddenly becomes a character, tells a new story every time. And for me, sun again is a very important element, because it's something which moves, and throughout the day it tells a new story.
True.
Because it shifts its shadows, it shifts its moment, it shifts its location inside that space. So every time for example, it might sit on an object at one point of time, and it could be sitting on the floor at a different point of time. It could be bright, it could be cloudy. So it becomes a very, very interesting, very vibrant character for us to play around with.
Very interesting. So you also tend to bring in elements of nature into your design, and in terms of your choice of material also. So how do you do that?
Yeah, as I told you earlier, I think one of the biggest challenges we everywhere across the globe are facing is our understanding of a material. Our lifestyle is based on this idea that we take something out from Mother Earth, we create a product out of that. It could be a camera to a laptop to a building to a pen to a shirt, whatever. But the resources are from Mother Earth. You take them out, you create a product, you use the product, and at the end of the product, what happens to that? You sell it into a landfill. So we work on a very linear concept of cradle to grave. A very, very linear concept of cradle to grave. We are trying to see whether we can move a little further and try and see whether we can get into a concept of cradle to cradle, which means that I take out resources from Mother Earth, I use it, create an architectural space, create a project, create a design element, and after its usage, it becomes food for another process. It is not recycled, but it becomes another loop by itself. So I'll be happy if by the end of my life, if I can create a building which can kill itself after its life and becomes a product for something else.
Interesting.
So I think the choice of materials comes from there. And we still don't have any material which can kill itself. But can I reduce the consumption of material, number one? Can I see that material sustains for the time it is required to be sustained? It does not mean permanence is not the order of the day today. You don't need a space which needs to survive for 400 years and then become a landfill. You would need a material which can survive for the time period it is to be used and then become food for another process. So I'm trying to see whether we can get into that kind of a practice today. For example, steel is something which we are trying to look at now because steel has usage which can be recycled for a long amount of time, can be used as another process for a long amount of time. So I delay the process of its decay, but I see that it goes through a lot of activities from its start to the end. So, yeah, did I answer your question?
Yeah.
We
got the trail of your thinking. So the choice of material, the way you design, and the way you really take inspiration from nature is what is very close to your heart.
Right.
So Hampi Center for Design is something which is very close thing for you now, and you're involved in it for the last few years. So how did you think about this, and what stage are you in, and what do you do there?
My love for teaching, my love for exploring with the younger lot has been there from the time I was a student. So when I was in my fourth year, because it was a new college, I ended up teaching my first year students, taking classes for them. So from then onwards, I've been working with students, learning from them, working with them, and exploring new thoughts. So an average age of my office today is around 20 plus. So we always get new fresh blood into our office. We work with interns. So we start exploring new thoughts with those kids. And I find that there's a major challenge with the way we are educating kids, with the way we are trying to bring in knowledge bases for design students or anybody for that matter. So today, education is something which is so marks driven that you study something and then at the end of the course you just vomit it out, and then you forget it for the remaining part of your life.
True.
Today I have taken my son for his for making him join his first PUC, and the first question they will ask me is, does he want to be an engineer or a doctor? So my immediate reaction is, I would love if he can become a chef.
Yeah.
Why is that process of the duality so strong in education, and why is everybody being tuned to study in that particular way? So I think we would want to look at other creative aspects. So how do I look at an ant and appreciate the way the ant works? It's an amazing insect. It could take 5,000 times its own weight. It could carry 5,000 times of its own weight. How does it do it? Can you question that? That sense of inquiry is lost among those kids. Yeah. So I felt that there's a need for a center where we dialogue on these thoughts, where we dialogue on various other aspects. And we said, let's start off a center of design dialogue. And we were doing a project way back somewhere in 2007 in Hampi for a couple of professors of Kannada from Hampi University. And when I went there and I started meeting them and then started seeing Hampi, I fell in love with that space. The material out there, the rocks out there, each rock had a story to tell. And Hampi is known for its ruins, but I fell in love with it because of its rocks, because of its compositions, because of a lot of mysticism which it held back. And you go there every time and your Hampi inspires you to push your boundaries beyond. I mean, the whole idea, I mean, as an engineer, as an architect, I would question the whole idea of a center of gravity, but those rocks defy a lot of those thoughts, and they're magical. And you go back in history, that's a place which was one of the first formed rocks in the world during the cooling down of the earth. And from then on, we've got so much of evolution which has happened in that space. Right to, we have a lot of Neolithic paintings in that place. You have a lot of, what is that called, campsites, which are where people, Neolithic people used to come, prehistoric people used to come and burn a lot of their stuff in that place. You have those burnt areas out there. So you have a lot of history. Then you come to mythology, that's the place of Rama, Hanuman, and Sugriv and all those people. But yeah, that's also a place which triggered certain social movements. So you have a lot of historical stories out there, tell us. So I said, can we look at creating a space there? And unfortunately or fortunately for us, we didn't find any school of design, any center of design in that belt. And it had so much of potential. And it created an ambience for people from across the globe to come and look at that space. Today, Hampi is a World Heritage Center, is a declared World Heritage Center by the UNESCO. It's on the bucket list of every person I meet, and they all say, oh, I would love to visit Hampi from across the globe. So we said, we have so many people visiting that space. We have so many students of architecture, students of design coming over and getting inspired by that space. Can we create a center of design dialogue, a center of design inquiry, a center for exploring new design thoughts in an ambience which had so much of history behind, so much of stories attached to it. So that's where we started working with Hampi Center of Design. My family was supportive enough. We all shifted to Hampi, and we've kind of rented a place there and started living there so that we get the pulse of that space. It's been 2 years now that we've been doing that.
Oh, nice.
And now we've just bought a piece of land to start that center. But a lot of activities have already started off. Yeah. One of the activities which we just recently conducted was an inquiry into the way design thinking is a very interesting learning process in most corporates today. So we said, beyond design thinking, can we get into a nature-inquired design thinking? Because if I look at human beings' presence on Earth, we've had a very tiny presence on this Earth. Say, if I look at a clock and I say Earth was formed at 0 hours, and it's taken 12 hours for us to reach where we are today. We've been on this Earth for the last 3 seconds. So out of the billions of years of evolution, we've had a recorded history of only around 50,000 years. So there's so much of evolution for us, so much of learning we can do from nature. So we said, can businesses work with the way nature works? Can finance managements work with the way nature works? Can design exploration happen through nature? So we started doing these workshops where myself and another friend of mine who's a naturalist, Ullas, we both sit together and get into that kind of a very strong design inquiry. We've started our workshops on that, where last week we had few people coming from, we had a chemical engineer, we had a finance manager, we had a student of architecture, we had a landscape architect, we had a product designer, we had a 9th standard student. So you had this whole group of people sitting together and dialoguing on how does that ant take 5,000 times its weight, and how do I use that as a process for my design exploration, or how does a fish breathe, and how do I use that to create a product range. Right? So it's a very interesting dialogue. It's very interesting. Same thing with the way we've explored Hampi Center of Design's management system. They're all based on ant colonies. So each ant colony has certain ants doing certain activities. So they kind of create an existence, an environment for that whole ant colony to work, but they all do their jobs, and it's not hierarchical, right? So somewhere we are trying to take that into the way Hampi Center of Design will work and say, do we have a colony of people who will work on workshops, a colony of people who will work on research, a colony of people who will work on marketing, whatever, sales, finance, administration, teaching, and then get those colonies together to explore various things. So we're doing that workshop. We're doing another workshop where a lot of people come to Hampi and visit Hampi, walk around, take a guide, see some spaces and get out. But can I look at so many stories which are hidden in Hampi? So we are now doing a workshop on knowing Hampi. The first workshop is working with a group from Chennai, where we are looking at how to look at Hampi from the perspective of a designer. So we have a historian who's done a lot of work coming in talking about Hampi. We have somebody who's worked on the flora and fauna of that place coming in talking about that. We have a folk artist who's coming in talking about folk stories of that place to those people. We have a photographer who has a different eye to picture Hampi coming in sharing his experience of that. So with this knowledge base, the students come and do that workshop and then get back. So it's this kind of various activities we are trying to club into the Hampi Center of Design, where it becomes a hub for design dialogue. It becomes so much of activities there. One more is we are also working on setting up a residency for artists and architects and designers from across the globe and to come and stay there. So if I'm having say around 10 to 12 artists visiting us for a month, there, and in the 12 months I have close to 100 people from various design fields from across the globe coming and working in that space. So any student of designers who are there, who could be in the School of Design or School of Architecture or whatever, get explored to those people, get exposed to the various thought processes of those 100 plus artists from across the globe and participate with them either as volunteers or as support staff or work on the project with them. The kind of learning those kids get would be amazing.
True.
So these are certain things we're trying to create in that space. We would want to document local crafts. We're now getting into an incubation cell which will support local craftsmen. We're losing a lot of crafts. Modern technology is kind of killing off crafts. Literacy, even though it was a brilliant movement, killed crafts. And we are trying to see if we can get some of those crafts back into practice for some more time.
True.
So you incubate those those craftsmen. They might not have the skill of business. They might not have the skill of marketing themselves. They might not have the skill of finding the right market. So they're leaving that skill and coming back and becoming an auto driver or a taxi driver in the city. But that's a treasure trove which we're losing. So can we create an incubation cell? We are now working with Parvati Finish with another 10th standard student from another school with whom we are working on setting that incubation cell with him on the Parvati Finish. We are working with Kinnara artists from Koppal on trying to see how that can come into the mainstay of architecture and design. So yeah, Hampi Center of Design is a lot of these ideas mushrooming out.
Very nice.
Slowly.
Very nice. So you're creating an ecosystem of people who want to learn, people who want to give back in terms of design aspects, and also to conserve and preserve and probably make these new old arts flourish, and those handicrafts and those arts and those skills flourish.
Parts of it, yes. That's part of our thought process.
Yeah.
In terms of research, we could even talk about futuristic materials.
Right.
Can we create Hampi is not just because of the historical element, it is just that power of thinking beyond. Because Hampi has been that platform of pushing boundaries to the next level. So I'm trying to see whether that can give me the power to see whether we can look at how to live in the future. How much, like I said, if Hampi can help me understand how to design a building which can kill itself with a new material. It's possible.
True.
So it's a kind of design dialogue, design discovery, which we want to do in that space.
So Chetan, tell me, is design only for architects and for designers, or is it meant for others? And what does Hampi Center for Design do in terms of involving other people and other professionals in this?
Right. No, I think design is a field which is going to get into all realms of our life.